I
start
wish I
right
was
now.
Welcome everybody to the Villagers Podcast.
Since you're finally done with dishwasher stuff.
I know, God, my real job. That's what people don't know. That's my real job. Yes,
Mhm.
sir. Okay, so I'm reading through your article on the fight over water, which we have the
Mhm.
same thing here.
Isn't it the
Down
Colorado
in
River?
Colorado, and now the huge Mississippi River that ends up in New Orleans because of
Mhm.
drought. The ocean is taking back over what used to be the river. Real
Oh,
problems, real problems, right? And they're then and some of that area is below sea level, so it just rolls
Mhm.
in. And they put up stuff to try to keep it out. Yeah, been messing around long enough. We've messed it up.
Yeah. Tomorrow we have like a strike from like 9 in the morning or something to 6 in the evening because there are
Ooh,
protests in our state to not open up the dam and release water to the state that is downstream. This
right.
has been a problem since like the 80s or even before that, Sean.
Well, I saw you had 16 years of negotiating. I,
Mhm.
I don't even, I mean, that's longer than my kid's mom. So, but I mean, the problem of being downstream is you're downstream. I
Hmm.
mean, so do you go in militarily and take it, or do you negotiate and
No, this
get
is
some?
just like a state to state beef, right? The Supreme
Right.
Court actually told them that, hey, this state can keep this much, but you need to release the rest, kind of thing.
Yeah, I saw
But
that.
the
Right.
farmers here are like, no, we need to keep that because we also need water. But we are such
Yeah.
a populous little place that I don't know, like, do you allocate it like per person or do you just go by this would be kind of similar on the lines of how people have the argument about the electoral college. Should you go
Right.
by
Yeah.
population or should you just go by whatever the courts
For
decide?
those of you who, for those of you who don't understand, for every vote in California in the United States Senate, um, for every vote in Montana, I believe it's 240 votes in Florida and in California, equal to one vote. So there's really
Mhm.
not equal representation. It just doesn't exist. But that's the way you keep the agriculture economies involved in politics, because otherwise, hey, they do grow all of our food. I mean, people
Mhm.
don't know we're dependent on them. And here it's the political ideology in the rural areas are still very self-sufficient, and if you live in
Mhm.
cities, nothing works that way. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody shares the same stuff, whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter. You have to. There's no them people over there. You know. Well, yeah, you guys have a problem there. So the deal with the Colorado River is
Mhm.
it was a crazy wild river, and when it would flood, it would kill hundreds of people each time because people didn't want to walk a half of a mile to the riverbank to get water. So they would set up, depending on whether it was teepees or tents or housing, too close to the river.
Mhm.
But the problem with it is the city of Las Vegas and the city of Phoenix should never have been built. They're both in the desert. They just shouldn't be cities. Much like New Orleans is below sea level, it shouldn't be a city.
Mhm.
And because we've made these decisions and they're modern cities, well, not New Orleans, it's ancient, but the other two, they're just drawing all these resources that they don't own. It's coming from somewhere else, and they are downstream once again.
Can you imagine that Vegas actually has the Formula One race in a couple of weeks, I guess? So they're
Wow.
basically closing the Vegas Strip so that the Formula One cars can race down it.
Well, somebody drunk doing something stupid will involve themselves in that race one way or another. You know, it's some of the stupidest times in my life, and God knows I've had many, happened in Vegas. Did you ever hear of a drug called poppers? Are you familiar with it?
Uh-uh.
Okay, well, poppers is called
Is it the cough
something
syrup one?
nitrate. Do what? No, no. You sniff it, you go amyl nitrate. So what it does is opens up all the blood vessels in your head, and you get this crazy rush off of it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
in the clubs, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And for some reason or another, I ran across some of that in Vegas. I ran across, anything you ever want in debauchery land exists in Vegas, and there's just a price on it. That's all.
Mhm.
Not bad.
So,
We'll
so
just
you're
leave all
telling
that
me
there.
to watch the race just to see how much the crowd
See,
interacts with the cars?
something will happen. Well, it's
Oh,
just
well.
not designed to be different than that. It's just, that's what the place is. And,
Mhm.
Formula One racing is not an American sport. No one cares. And the places that have it have to be international places. Like Miami did it, and now Vegas
Mhm.
will do it. They were
Austin did
talking about
it.
doing.
I think Austin still has it. So
Oh wow!
so here's the thing. Formula One is following the same blueprint that the MLS followed to bring
Yeah,
sports that they think that will be popular in America in the future. Because they
right.
see NASCAR and they're like, oh shit, Formula One should also be popular because we're not just going in circles.
The difference is Formula One is for uptight whiteys.
Mm-hmm.
NASCAR is for Trump voters. That's where he would go talk to a million people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
110,000 people in the stands and millions watching it every week, and those are the outcasts. So, do you know what the NASCAR means?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so nice car, NASCAR. I wish I was kidding. It's from the old liquor runners and moonshiners down in the southeastern part of the United States, and they needed to be able to outrun the police. And so they
Mm-hmm.
build up these cars because back then there was no radio or anything. You could just outrun them. Yeah, nice car became NASCAR.
I
Yeah,
thought it was an
that's
abbreviation for something.
oh, it is. It just isn't anything good. Isn't that crazy though? But that's the actual story behind it. You know the
Yeah.
actual story behind NCAA athletics, since we're on this weird shit. So,
Mm-mm.
in England, only the royals could be pro athletes. Everybody else
Okay.
were beneath that. That is the system that set up the NCAA as well. That's why none of them ever got paid.
Oh wow.
They just took it off of that system, right?
You know,
It
like
just
the class system in sports is like blatantly obvious. Like when the Queen died.
right.
So
Yeah.
when the Queen died, the only games they cancelled were the English Premier League games because they couldn't trust the crowd to keep quiet for the 2 minutes of silence because they will start
You
singing
know
some
it.
horrible song.
Oh
But
yeah.
do you know the two sports that were allowed to continue? Tennis and cricket.
What?
Because those crowds weren't
What?
going to fuck with a moment's silence, right? And
Right.
those were more of the elite sports.
Yeah. So I mean, there really is something to it. So I personally don't see Formula One coming.
Mhm.
People, so the state fair is going on in Oklahoma right now. And let me rotate my bread here. So the state fair is going on here, Deepak, and you've been to it. I've been to it.
Mhm.
I don't know why anyone would ever go again, but it's not
Do you
me.
know
It's
I took my sister to one of them?
oh wow. Okay, that'd be hilarious. Okay, so the county fairs are great because people that are farmers, ranchers, and et cetera get to bring their kids in and they compete,
Mhm.
for from animal husbandry on down. So, but the state fair is basically, what people go to NASCAR for. You see people that are like you doing things that you like to do. And the most
Mhm.
creative thing I remember 3 years ago at the Texas State Fair was fried butter.
Oh wow.
Right. And they froze it and they dipped it in some shit and fried it. People paid $8 all day long. But the deal is to out redneck the next person. And look, I don't mean rednecks in a bad way. These guys create more stuff out of nothing
Mhm.
than anybody I've ever seen. Rather than just sitting there going, well, I ain't got the tools, we're not going to do it. They figure out a way to make stuff happen. There was a movie called Con Air,
Mhm.
Conair, with one of the best scenes that ever described that part of America, which was they were trying to get on this airplane and the battery was dead.
Mhm.
And the token redneck, knew how to jumpstart it from a car battery. And the guy literally was trying to make fun of him and give him a compliment all at the same time, like I would do. You just go, well, that's insane, but brilliant, but brilliant. And they just, being poor white rural folks, you just had to deal with what was there.
Mhm.
So the time to shine dress up for NASCAR, dress up for the state fair.
Oh yeah.
I think you and I would be considered elitist assholes to most of that group until they hung out with us for a while, and then we might get the okay sign.
Yeah. I'm sure if people get to know us, they'll realize that it's not just this dickishness that's always around.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so let's get back to water. I'm sorry, I got off on a couple of tangents there, which is no surprise to anyone that listens to our podcast. So I have told my son, and I shouldn't blab this on anything that goes over the airwaves, that what we need to do at this point in life is buy a block of land up in Detroit. So Detroit is where all American manufacturing happened. It's where all the war items came from World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, which are most well-known wars. So they have the infrastructure for a major city. And when Americans started buying foreign cars rather than American cars, Detroit basically kind of closed down. But the infrastructure was built marvelously because they needed it for all that industry. Yeah. A third of the world's fresh water is right there. Detroit is on that lake.
Is that Lake Superior? No. What am I thinking?
Shit, I don't know which one. It's Huron, Superior, and I forget what the other one is. Dude, I don't, we learned that in 4th grade. I don't remember any of that shit. Hey, what did Einstein say? If it's in a book, don't memorize it.
I do remember one of Anthony Bourdain's final episodes was an episode he did in Detroit and what had happened to the city.
Yeah. Well, it's like any city. They took for granted the car business. I was around when the cars were coming out in the late 70s and 80s. So they had the muscle cars, like the real cool ones you see on television from the early 70s and 60s. And then they switched it all. And we had the gas war with the Saudis, which is, one way or another still going on. But they weren't able to adapt because they never had to.
Yeah.
They would have to go they'd have to go buy a foreigner's car and take it apart to see how it was made. They didn't have any engineers to do it because, they'd just been rolling down the same old road. And the cars were enormous back then, Deepak. I mean, like, the little 3-wheel deals you guys have for taxis and whatnot?
Yeah.
I drove a car in high school that you could have placed 4 of those on all around it, and it would have fit perfectly.
Oh, yeah. I've seen some of the old ones.
Yeah, ugly as shit, but gigantic. So that is the future I would be looking at. In the world that is going to war over water, you want to be as close to the water as possible. At least you can go get some.
The way someone was asking me whether I was planning on like drilling a well in a piece of land that we have here, just so that I don't have to depend on any other source of water. And I was like, you do know that if everybody in that neighborhood keeps drilling an individual well, what happens to the water table? They're like, you can't think of it like that. You have to be selfish and see what you need. And I was like, I don't know if I'm built that way, but I'll look into it.
Yeah. So we have a deal called the Oglala Waterford. So it is Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, I think part of Arkansas and part of Missouri. And in Nebraska, they grow all the corn that basically the cows eat in America. I know that sounds crazy, but they grow specific types. But they all have drilled into that thing, and they use these big, huge, gigantic pumps to feed the land. Well, that deal was a while back. It was down to a 75-year, or maybe it was just 50 feet of water. I don't remember. Where you go, hey, we got to quit growing this stuff for cattle. I mean, and did they stop? No. Did we channel the Mississippi River to refill it? No. Did we do anything? No. I mean, we were having 1,000-year floods. How did somebody not just poke a hole in the ground? I mean, Jesus, how hard can this be? And maybe they don't want the chemicals down there because the water's, so clean. But yeah, we gotta catch it while it's here. I mean, all of California's aquifers are full again, which they were dead empty 2 years ago.
It's weird, right? Like The places that were expecting droughts have now like overflown with water, and the ones that were flooding are now like not getting as much rain as they used to.
Yeah, it's nuts. And England is actually growing decent grapes for wine.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have ever seen that coming?
I know, and it can't just be like what was it? There was one part of like the south end where it almost looked tropical, the south of the UK, and that was only because back then it was a small strip because of the El Nino or whatever the hell that current is that flows by them. So that was the only reason that was there. But now I think it's like growing where even further up you're able to grow certain tropical type fruits or temperate fruits, whatever they are.
Yeah, it's crazy. But, you know, my thing is I always try to go, what's the biggest thing in the long run? Clean water. I mean, it really, and you look at what, you know, your guys aren't ready to kill each other over it yet, but it'll come.
I'll probably have to search that and see if anybody died during the riots during the previous few beefs that they had. I do know that some farmers did commit suicide or something in protest, because they didn't have enough water to like grow their crops, and they're losing their land to banks and weren't able to repay stuff. Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Dust Bowl in America, bro.
I know.
Look, it's weird. I mean, you know, and we say this 100 times on here. We're in a weird space right now, and you know, like your friend said, hey, be selfish, get what you need, and you go, man, we gotta get out of that mentality. You know, it's very unwhite. It's very unwhite to get out of that mentality.
So based on this was actually something I was thinking about doing, which was India is basically 34% the geographical size of the United States. Okay. But we have...
That's all?
Yeah, we're just 34% of all of the landmass of the USA. But we hold 1.1 billion more people. Okay. Now, look at it just purely from economics. If everyone in this country aspires to live the Western life of a modern life with refrigerator, water, air conditioning, couple of cars, motorcycles, all of the fancy stuff, 75% of this population has to go.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's right. It has to be something catastrophic. And you've got a big desert area in the middle, which, you know, dwarfs our desert area. So I honest to God, I did not know the continent was that small, or the continent, the shelf that you guys are on. The vastness of America is shocking. So I had cousins that landed in Los Angeles during the World Cup last time we had it, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to pop over for a visit." You know, you're going to be in airports for a whole day. Don't waste your trip. You know, I mean, literally. Because they just assumed from a map perspective. So you guys are only about as big as in California, Oregon, and probably a couple more states thrown in there. I mean, big states, or maybe Texas and maybe a couple more.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
how the hell do you grow that much food? What?
I have no idea how we grow that much food, but think about just the logistics issues of why most of us live in like high rises in the city, where the city is slowly building up, similar to like a London and a New York type.
Right.
Whereas the outskirts, people are right now. You do have that flight where people are looking for land on the outside of the city to just commute to work type stuff.
Right.
And there is no way of sustaining whatever this model is, because it's just wishful thinking at this point. And to add insult to injury, think about it. I was reading this, actually it was on a podcast where they were talking about some sort of AI that was called Code Da Vinci 2, which is the precursor of what they released to the public named as ChatGPT.
Right.
Apparently, that stupid thing could write poetry, and it's released in a book. It didn't. Wow. So when the testers were testing that application, they initially asked it to write in different people's styles, and they realized it could do it. So they just asked it to write it on its own. And it starts off with like it writing. It's a book called, I think, The Code of Me or something like that, where it starts off with poems about like it being born and it in its adolescence till it
Oh
ends
wow.
with like poems about it destroying humanity type shit.
Oh wow. Holy shit.
And
Okay, you
that
got to send me
was,
a link or put up a link to that.
oh, for sure. But the
Yeah.
interesting part was that already existed somewhere in like 2018. The one they
Oh
released
wow.
to us is just OpenAI, where it doesn't let you do any of that.
Huh.
And the guy
Wow.
explaining ChatGPT was it basically is a more closed end version of that one, because they just
Right.
took this AI, gave it to people in Kenya and Nigeria, and made them feed it just information that it shouldn't show for
Right.
like $2
Wow.
an hour. So they were talking about it like a child, where they just shipped this child to Kenya, where it got slapped every time it did something wrong, and then
Right.
they gave it back to the users and said, "Okay, now y'all can play with it."
Wow. Well, I mean, that's not a bad idea. Look, you know me, I use Chat GBT and I like it. And my daughter told me I need to specify whether I'm using it or not on things that I write. And I go, look, I use a microwave to heat up food. I mean, I write the material. It just helps me rewrite it and is better. There's absolutely nothing wrong in my view of using that. And I would have used it in school and everything else. I would have been that student. But I mean, why wouldn't you? So here's the thing. I'm old enough to tell this story. You are not. When I was in grade school, calculators came out. And we would bring them and try to use them. And the teachers go, there will be a time that you will not have that with you, and you will need to know how to do this. That has just turned out not to be true. Right. I've got a phone with me everywhere. I've got calculators at home. I mean, I can, if I don't have it, I can borrow somebody's phone, do it. So what was a quote I told you a couple of weeks ago? We right now are using the worst technology we will ever use in our lives. It will only get better. And like, we don't even, you might know more what's coming in 5 or 10 years, but I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
No clue.
It is weird. So the reason why I brought up that AI is that think about all the outsourcing industries that exist in southern India, which is basically like our Silicon Valley. What happens to all these jobs if automation takes over that much, where there are way more sophisticated AIs there, which are technically still LLMs, which are large language modules, but they haven't released it to the public because they do not know how companies and people will start using them.
So, I mean, have I told you the argument thing here with Kathy and the robot? Okay. So the way one of our restaurants is designed, you have to go down a hallway about 20 feet and navigate it to bring food into the restaurant. So me, a general manager of a restaurant, just has to run food all night. And for that, I can buy a $10,000 robot that they can load up in the kitchen and just send the food to me. It doesn't go to tables. It just brings it to a wait station. And you carry it from there, and she's vehemently against it. And I'm like, this is the same thing as doing a microwave. This is actually brilliant because there's no arguments in the kitchen then. You take out all the personalities. They put it in the deal. It rolls into the other room, and we go.
Yeah.
I mean,
that would actually be pretty efficient too.
That's why I would use it. But we're working on that one. Everybody struggles with technology in a person-to-person business, which is what I'm in. But I'll guarantee if I opened up an Italian restaurant where the robots cook the food, people would go there because it would be exactly the same every time.
Yeah, consistency type thing.
Yeah, right. Crazy. So I don't know. We've gone from water to technology. I guess it's all intertwined, truthfully. But if you don't have water,
the reason we ended up talking about this was because what happens when all these jobs start diminishing and we still exist with such a large population that now we have to figure out new ways to feed them, to employ them. But also on the positive note that I'm not mentioning is that what you mentioned, you do not know what all these technologies are going to create as jobs in the future. Like back then, if I had told my father when he was alive that, oh, we do a podcast, he'd be like, what the fuck is that? Because it didn't exist during his time, right? Mm.
Right. And we're literally live in two countries. Yeah.
Yep.
Time zones apart. Yeah. I mean, it'd be like a telephone call. It wouldn't make any sense to anybody. Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. You know, I don't mind being in this time in life. I mean, it's curious, it's exciting, but I'm also willing to adapt. And I think maybe that's another thing. I'll give you the best example of that is TikTok. You know, businesses that have not adapted to advertise on there,
Yeah.
and I get more done on there politically than I can any other format. Oh wow!
Oh, yeah.
My bread looks beautiful, bro. Beautiful. So
Maybe you
yeah, I
should
don't.
give people a shot of the bread at some point, Sean, since they know you're making
Oh,
bread all the time.
so they know I actually am. I will do that when I make sure my stove looks better. You know, it's not something that you know you just throw bread in, you pull it out, but it really, yeah,
Yeah.
I will do that. I will do that. All right. So how's the local going?
Local's good. I actually went
Yeah.
there on like Saturday night with a buddy of
Right.
mine, and they had like upgraded their menus and just there was so they have live music, they have karaoke on certain nights. Some
Mhm.
nights they let performers go in there and perform all kinds of weird
Right.
stuff. It's really like a pub because you would see families there sitting with their children
Right.
and stuff. Mm.
And how does that go with your culture over there? Are they used to that from having the Brits around or no?
They are. They're more
Yeah.
used to it than I think they find it more comfortable with places like this where the kids are also around rather than them
Right.
just getting someone to take care of the kids and running out themselves type stuff.
Yeah. Right. Understand. Okay. Let's cover this Richmond from Richmond guy
Hmm.
who, you know, he's now a political force. He finally got himself a representation, which he's never had. He did not have representation with that song blowing up worldwide. So why does that song hit in India? Why does it hit in America? Why does it hit in England? That thing literally hits wherever it goes.
Yeah.
And what does that tell you about where we are labor wise? So you talk about the folks that you have doing all the call centers and all this other stuff. Most of that will go to AI because I've been on AI computers that pretty dang good prompts. I mean,
Yeah.
they really are. So they're dependable. They never have to sleep. You know, they do break occasionally, but so do humans.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know what's next, but I had a brother-in-law of mine work for Payless Cashways. They were a big hardware store.
Good.
And he had to train a group of Indians, literally, to replace him on his job because he was being cut.
Oh wow.
And it changed him. Like he's in the basement, has too many guns around the house, you know, OAN News, Fox News, you know, Donald Trump, all that stuff. And I still remember him being very bitter about it. But I was like, well, you know, I mean, this is how everything works. Everybody goes where cheaper labor is. I mean, labor's hard. I am definitely a pro labor guy, but it is still just difficult to get the negotiations down and get people to do what they agreed to. It is. So I don't know. It's Richmond of Richmond. That dude. Nobody capitalized on him politically because he blew it up for the Republicans when they showed it at their deal. So they've got a debate this week. So supposedly the Donald's not going again, which I wouldn't go if I was him. If I was up that high.
I know. Isn't he like just making them all fight for second place?
Oh
yeah. Doing nothing.
But they're all fighting for 4 years from now. None of those guys are running for president right now. And everybody needs to understand that. Now, what Trump has to do is pick a vice president because Mike Pence is not going to be his vice president after he told people to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that little thing.
Right. You know, all the polls show these guys neck and neck, which sounds like it's closer than it is. There is 35% of our country that wants him back. I don't know why, but they do. But there's 66% that don't ever want to see him again. So
yeah,
the odds are not in his favor.
I need to
That's
send
what I
you
would say.
this. I need to send you this beautiful clip by John Mulaney when I think this was when he was still on cocaine and other drugs, but he did this amazing
No,
bit. No, but he had
no.
this amazing bit about where he talks about politics in the US without mentioning anything. And this was like
Right.
during 2016 to 2020, sometime then it came out. And he talks about, I want to talk to you guys about how we have let a horse loose in the hospital. So
Right.
that's the premise of the bit. And he's like, people come on TV and they're like, I've once seen an bird at an airport. And you're like, get the fuck out of here. That's not a horse in the hospital.
Right. Yeah. It's not the same.
And he's
thing.
like, you're waking up every morning, checking your phone, trying to figure out what did the horse do today. And sometimes it's just like regular stuff. You're like, the horse used the elevator. And you just sit there going like, I don't know if the horse could use an elevator, that kind of stuff. It is an amazing
That's
thing.
awesome.
He does like 12 to 15 minutes on that.
Dang, I got to see that. Yeah, I mean, hey, look, if he gets back in, we got issues. But I got to tell you, like our election board here, we've now got a Trumper in charge of it, and they were going to win Oklahoma anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I don't know what's up with people here that they would that they're in his corner. And I honest to God, like I don't understand that. And that would be most people on my side, you know, because I'm pretty business oriented, reasonable and shit. But I don't want a lunatic in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair.
This is how we start the week, by just depressing people, just in multiple countries for no reason, about water shortage, labor issues, AI, and finally just wrap it up with politics and say we don't know.
The only thing we're missing is 2 beers and being in a pub. Well, I'm in a pub. The only thing we're missing is 2 beers in the other pub.